I'll be talking today on the principles of crop breeding for breeding climate resilient germplasm in the different important crops of economic importance. So my specific focus will be on developing drought and early heat stress tolerance germplasm in wheat. The strong trends in the climate change have been already evident, and the likelihood of the future changes and the impacts give an urgency to address the agricultural adaptation to the limited water availability. And in case of wheat, when we talk of the limited water use, it means that wheat has to be sown a bit early on the residual moisture from the previous crop. And hence this somewhat early sowing leads to the crop exposure to the early heat stress at the germination stage. Thus, this situation indicates that the need of drought as well as early heat stress tolerance is very important in wheat, especially in the future in view of the climate change and the changing weather parameters. So in addition to the climate change as well as the substantial population increase, typically in the Asian countries, the situation calls for the development of the high-yielding stress-resilient crops. So this is the small pictorial representation of the chicken consumption and how much kg feed per kg edible weight of the chicken is required. So just looking briefly at the trends from 1987-88 to the year, just an year before, 2019 to 20, it has changed from the consumption per person per kg per year has increased from 0.24 to 7 kg. So this dietary habit shifts can be sustained only through the greater crop productivity. The otherwise very impressive pace of the past development seems really insufficient when it comes to meeting the future needs. And at the same time, the future challenges really seem to outweigh the past achievements. So this figure shows the yield trends, which are really insufficient to double the global crop production by the year 2050, which has been targeted in much of the literature and other scientific discussions that we need to really double the global crop production by 2050. So the trends for maize, rice, wheat, soybean has been shown. The dashed line represents the trend required to double the production by 2050. And it is very obvious if you see for most of the crops, and typically for the wheat shown in the purplish pink line, the dashed line is far, far away from the line from where we stand today. So this makes really the tougher situation for the future breeders. The challenges for the crop improvement in meeting current and the future food needs are the collaborative effects of the climate variability, changing dietary patterns, and this calls for the need to increase the productivity, that too with the lower input use. The most important question which arises when we are aware of the scenario is, like, can the programs in the conventional mold measure up to these challenges? So honestly speaking, what I think is that really the conventional programs cannot alone cope up with this and cannot give the exact quantity of the product required by the future years. So moreover, all this problem is further accentuated by the proliferation of the breeding objectives. Briefly, if I would name some of the breeding objectives which have been comparatively, the newer ones include water use efficiency, the hidden hunger, nutraceuticals, commercialization, mechanized harvesting, and other things. On the top of all the situation, the shrinking time frames have really caused the, put the all crop breeders on the toes, actually. Because the earlier breeders, like when we talk of about 20-30 years back, they had the privilege to breed the crops or the varieties at their own pace. But now the time frame has really shrinked, typically in the case of the abiotic stresses. Like in the case of stripe rust resistance, by the time the breeder is ready, by the new variety having the pyramided genes, the particular gene already becomes susceptible. So that clearly shows that we have the very limited time to give the product and make it reach to the farmer's field. Keeping all these points in view, so what I could conclude from this is some of the hallmarks of the new era breeding programs. So which typically includes the ability to handle a multitude of traits. It's not like simply handling a single trait. If we are talking about the drought or the heat resistance, means definitely we need higher yield, good grain shape, good grain weight, hectoliter weight, as well as the foliar resistance. If there's no foliar resistance in a cultivar, definitely the drought would not translate in the drought stress tolerant may not translate into the yield gains. So when there's such a multitude of traits, the accelerated breeding process, typically in the time of shrinked time frames, is required. That is, the speed breeding is the only answer to deliver the varieties at the farmer's field in a significantly shorter time frame. So all this speed breeding should be using the other gene and genomic resources, the precise and the rapid mobilization of the genes for the intelligent deployment in the genotypes suitable for various cultivation contexts. And on top of all the breeding activities, the advanced information management system for all the allelic, haplotypic, genealogical data of the breeding program has now become the necessity for any vibrant breeding program. So when we try to assess ourselves, like how far have we moved in the direction of these new era breeding programs? So here I'd like to talk about the wheat improvement program at the Punjab Agricultural University, Punjab, India. So we are trying to respond to the ground realities, the impasse and diversification efforts. The major area under the wheat is under the medium duration, high yielding variety, or maybe two varieties. The ecological burden also gets piling up every year because of the maximum use of the weedicides and the nutrients, etc. So the response and the effect which we have felt since the decade, or say 1.5 decade of working towards the drought resilience or the climate resilience, is that we have developed few varieties that have extra 5 to 6 days, either at either end. Maybe at the initial end, they can be sown early on the residual moisture and have the early heat stress tolerance, or they are tolerant to the terminal heat stress. So they would lead to the more higher per day as well as the total productivity. So lesser rice residue is now present in the fields after the crop rice harvesting due to the use of the low biomass rice varieties. This results in the easy operation of the zero-till tillage machines, happy seeder for wheat sowing, etc. And straw burning has also come down by around 39 to 41% approximately. Now, the different stages of the drought stress in the crop. So whatever the stage is, it is leading to actually the drastic drastic reduction in the yield. The most important stages are the crop emergence or the early seedling stage, when the plant stand has to be maintained or developed at the field, early seedling stage, then the vegetative stage, and the flowering and the grain filling stage. In the earlier times, it was thought that it is the grain filling stage that is actually affected by any type of biotic or the abiotic stress. But the studies and our experience at PAU has shown that the early seeding stage, vegetative stage, etc. have also the same effect on the yield reduction. The challenges for the drought stress breeding is the uncertainty in the time of the drought, intensity of the drought, duration of the drought, moreover, the genotype into environment interactions. Now coming to the breeding approaches. Coming to the breeding approaches for the drought resistance, the conventional breeding method, they can be used with the precision phenotyping molecular techniques and the inclusion of the speed breeding. The difficulties in the drought resistance breeding become the genome size in the wheat. The most important challenge with the breeding wheat for the abiotic stress tolerance is its sheer genetic complexity. The wheat genome is 5 times larger than the human genome. Just imagine this. And though it has been mapped completely, but it still really needs to be completely understood. Moreover, the response of the plants to the drought is controlled by a large gene networks of the redundant genes at times, and unraveling the genetic function of the network, this network is quite challenging. So is there a strategy for enhancing the drought thermotolerance? What's the measure for this? Is it really the absolute productivity under the stress? How to test it? Yield trials under the stress conditions? And how to breed for it? If the measure and the testing is okay, how do we breed for the abiotic stress tolerance? May it be the drought stress tolerance or the thermotolerance, early heat stress tolerance or the terminal heat stress tolerance? These all the above tests, the productivity under the stress and the yield trials under the stress conditions, drought, irrigated, restricted irrigation, etc. They can be implemented only in the last phase of breeding program when the bulks are being tested. So what about the segregating generations? The breeders have to come up with a very precise method like how to do it. So from our side, the answer is the breeders or the plant physiologists, they should operate through the component or the indices of the stress tolerance. The indices will allow the demarcation of the donors, but also serve as the selection criteria in the early segregating generations. And this is the more than 1.5 decade of exploration has addressed this issue in wheat HPA. And we have shortlisted some of the selection criteria. The physiological parameters mainly include the membrane thermostability, canopy temperature depression, leaf chlorophyll during grain filling, stem reserve mobilization, osmotic pressure measurement, desiccation, etc. Whereas the identification of the morphological characters includes the ground cover biomass at the seedling stages, then the phasic development, which is very important, the transition to the flowering, whether it is flowering through stress or under stress, or it is taking its normal relaxed time to flower. Then the ability to fill and set grain also. The key question is the extent of the natural genetic variation which we propose to tap, is that sufficient? And how strongly do the biochemical indices and the molecular index they associate with the actual yield performance under the heat stress at the farmer's field? So in PAU, the plant material has been the real population, set of synthetic weights, chromosomal substitution lines, and a core germplasm set of the advanced germplasm breeding lines. So we have been trying to study the drought tolerance in that and trying to develop the material using the identified donors at the parents, etc. The synthetic hexaploid weeds have been shown to be quite resilient when we talk about the early heat stress tolerance and the drought. Now the roots. We have been doing the adult plant and screening for the root system architecture studies. It's like recognizing the header half of the wheat for its association with the stem, with the stress tolerance. Roots are actually responsible for the uptake of the water from the soil, and many root traits are linked with the drought tolerance. And though many studies have been recently done in the last 5 years have been done on the root architectural studies, but still the root architecture system under the water limited condition needs to be studied further. So this is some of the presentation, pictorial presentation of the variation in the root system, and identification, and the outcome is the identification of the lines which have been used in the breeding techniques. To sum up the breeding strategy, we have the identification of the material, tolerant material, then hybridization, marker assisted pyramiding of the foliar resistant genes into the already tolerant lines, or the breeding of the material using them as parents, coupled with the accelerated breeding mate with the double haploid, speed breeding, rapid generation, advanced, etc. So the keynote is the seamless integration of the newer tools with the conventional breeding program. So now coming to the policy, like development of the drought tolerant varieties goes to the multi-location testing, approval by the state national agencies, and release of the variety for the public use. But these multidisciplinary problems require a multidisciplinary solution that is the focus on the integrated rather than the specific disciplinary sciences, strengthening of the interface with the decision or the policy makers. A crucial component of this approach is the complementation of the adaptive assessment frameworks that are actually relevant, quite robust, and easily operated by all the stakeholders and the policymakers, scientists, and the farmers. Endless race for the higher yields do come at a cost, and the question needs to be asked whether the industry or the farmer or the other stakeholders would be happier to hedge their bets on the varieties which are resilient, more hardier, but can produce, but may produce some lower yields. And for sure, if the situation worsens, there would be no more option. Thank you.